so I'll take the stair into the Housing and Technical Resources Committee on 30th of August 2023. I've noted we have Councillors Brogan, Archie Buchanan, Matthew Buchanan, Kalikis, Convery and Cooper present. I've also got Councillor Cowan, Councillor Devlin and Councillor Dewar present. Councillor Faulkner, Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Fulton. We have apologies from Councillor Gowland and I believe Councillor Kerr will be substituting, but she's got an IT issue. Do we have Councillor Gray? Yes, she's with us as well. We have Councillor Lambie, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Lockhart present. And as the Chair's mentioned, Councillor Mars has sent apologies with Councillor Toner substituting. Councillor McCallan, Councillor McCreary, Councillor McLachlan and Councillor Ray are present. Councillor Shearer is present. Councillor Walker is present as well, as is Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any declarations of interest? No. Can we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting at page 5? I'll move that as a correct record.
I'll second that.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much. Monitoring items number 3 on the agenda, it's a revenue budget. Monitoring 22 to 23, housing and technical resources, excluding the housing revenue account. I'm going to hand you over to Graham Booth to take us through that report. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is on pages 13 to 18 of your papers, is to provide information on actual expenditure against budget for housing and technical resources, excluding HRA, for financial year 2022-23 for the period 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2023. This is the 5th Revenue Monitoring Report to Committee for financial year 2022-23. Sections 5.1 to 5.3 on pages 13 and 14 outline the year-end position and the resources reporting an overspend of £5,000 against the budget before transfers to reserves and an overspend of £80,000 after approved transfers to reserves. The agreed transfer to reserves is in relation to the Local Heat and Energy Efficiency Strategies funding committed at LEN 2023-24. The overspend is due to the net effect of overspends in property maintenance and estates, offset by underspends in office accommodation and the Scheme of Assistance budget. Appendices A to C on pages 15 to 17 provide details on the year-end position. Detailed variance explanations and proposed variants for each of the services are shown in appendices B and C. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the overspend of £80,000 to 31st of March 2023 after transfers to reserves, and to approve the proposed variants. Thank you.
I'll second it.
Did you switch it on? Okay, thanks very much. Is there any questions or comments? Item 4 on the agenda, a revenue budget monitoring 22-23, housing technical resources, housing revenue account. And back to you again. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is on pages 19 to 21 of your papers, is to provide information on actual expenditure against budget for housing and technical resources HRA for financial year 2022-23 for the period 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2023. Again, this is the 5th Revenue Monitoring Report to Committee for financial year 2022-23. Sections 5.1 and 5.2 on page 19 outline the year-end position and the resources reporting a break-even position. The break-even position was after a final transfer from the balance sheet of £3.990 million. This was slightly higher than the budgeted drawdown from reserves, but a significant improvement from that anticipated probable outturn. The required drawdown position is primarily due to overspends in repairs and maintenance as a result of demands in the service and the overall cost of providing the service by the internal contractor. This was offset by underspends in employee costs, bad debt provision and loan charge repayments, in addition to an over-recovery in rental income. Appendix A on page 21 provides detailed variance explanations and proposed variants for the HRA. Again, I refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the break-even position to 31st of March 2023 and to approve the proposed budget variance. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much. Item 5 on the agenda, revenue budget monitoring 23-24, housing and technical resources, excluding housing revenue account. I'm going to ask Graham again to take us through this report. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is on pages 23 to 27 of your papers, is to provide information on actual expenditure against budget for housing and technical resources, excluding HRA, for financial year 2023-24. And this covers the period 1st of April 2023 to 14th of July 2023. And this is the first revenue monitoring report to committee for financial year 2023-24. Section 5.1 on page 23 notes that as at 14th of July 2023, there is a break-even position against the phased budget, and the forecast for the budget to 31st of March 2024 is also a break-even position. Appendices A to C on pages 25 to 27 provide details on the financial position. Detailed variance explanations and proposed variants for each of the services are shown in appendices B and C. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the break-even position as at 14th of July 2023 and to approve the proposed budget variants. Thank you.
Thank you again, Graham. I'm going to move those recommendations.
I'll second them.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much again. Item 6 on the agenda, revenue budget monitoring 23-24, housing and technical resources, housing revenue account. And that's Graham Booth again, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is on pages 29 to 31 of your papers, is to provide information on actual expenditure against budget for housing and technical resources HRA for financial year 2023-24, again for the period 1st of April 2023 to 14th of July 2023. And this is also the first revenue monitoring report to committee for financial year 2023-24. Section 5.1 on page 29 notes that as at 14th of July 2023, there is a break-even position against the phased budget, and the forecast for the budget to 31st of March 2024 is also a break-even position. Appendix A on page 31 provides detailed variance explanations and proposed variants for the HRA. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the break-even position as at 14th of July 2023 and to approve the proposed budget variants. Thank you.
Thank you again, Graham. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is the capital budget monitoring 22-23, housing and technical resources, excluding housing revenue account. And there's Lorraine O'Hagan. Lorraine, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Committee. This is the first of 2 reports I'll present to you this morning, starting on page 33, and it's the final capital budget monitoring report for the financial year 2022-23. This position was included in the overall council position that we reported to Executive Committee back in June. Section 3 gives you the background and notes there was no change to the budget since we last reported to committee in March this year, so the total programme for the year remains at 8.436 million. Section 5 gives you the detailed financial implications, and it notes that against that budget of 8.436, we had a final spend position of 4.883 million, and that's an underspend of just over £3.5 million compared to the approved programme. Section 5.2 goes on to explain the main projects which are responsible for the underspend, and largely lies on a number of projects which are multi-year and multi-project programmes, if you like. So we had been trailing that as we got towards the end of the year, so it shouldn't come as a surprise. And anything that we didn't spend in the old year will carry forward into the new financial year, and I'll pick that up in the next report. Section 5.4 notes the accounting adjustments that we made at the end of the year, fairly minor, and that's really to take some spend that was in the capital programme and take it across to the revenue side, just because of the nature of the spend. So in section 5.5, you can see that the final capital spend from an accounting perspective only is 4.831 million. If I can take committee back to the recommendations in section 2 and ask that the Housing and Technical Resources Programme, excluding the Housing Revenue Account, of 8.436 million and the spend for the year of 4.883 million be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I'll move those recommendations.
I'll second them.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much. Item 8 on the agenda, capital budget monitoring 22-23, housing and technical resources, housing revenue account. And it's back to Graham Booth for that, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is on pages 37 to 39 of your papers, is to provide information on the progress of the capital programme for Housing and Technical Resources HRA for the period 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2023. And this is the fifth capital monitoring report presented to the Committee for financial year 2022-23. Section 5.1 on page 37 notes the actual expenditure in the housing programme was 60.695 million, a net underspend of 5.666 million. And again, this has been carried forward to financial year 2023-24. The underspend was due to a number of factors, but mainly delays in relation to the expected milestone payments for the Kirk Street Straven new build project, and also property services operatives being diverted to tackle the impact of the bad weather in December, which resulted in significant damage to a number of council properties. The Kirk Street Straven new build project was subsequently completed and handed over early in the new financial year. Appendix A on page 39 provides further details on the financial position and the funding sources. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the revised Housing and Technical Resources HRA capital programme of 66.361 million and expenditure to 31st of March 2023 of 60.695 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move those recommendations.
I'll second them.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? No. Item 9 on the agenda is Capital Budget Monitoring 23-24, Housing and Technical Resources, excluding Housing Revenue Account. And it's Lorena Hagan, please.
Thanks again, Chair. So this is the new year report then for the Housing and Technical Resources Capital Programme in the General Fund side. It's the first report of the new financial year and it reflects the budget and spend position to the 14th of July. Section 3 gives you the background and explains how the budget is based on the overall capital programme for the new year presented to Executive Committee at June. And Section 5 gives a wee bit more detail in terms of the financial position. So the resources capital programme then for the year is 11.923 million. So that budget is based on the original programme of projects we had approved back in February 2023, updated to include the budget that we carried forward from the old financial year into the new year. The budget of 11.923 also reflects the estimated level of spend which we think we can achieve in the current financial year based on the information that we have available when we set the programme back in June. In addition to that, we also had an adjustment that was approved by the Executive Committee. An additional 124,000 was added to the programme. That was approved back in June, and the details of that are in Appendix A to your programme. Finally, Section 5.3 notes the anticipated spend was £560,000 as at the 14th of July, and we actually spent £575,000. So we were slightly ahead of profile at that point in the year. If I can then refer committee back to the recommendations in Section 2 and ask that the Housing and Technical Resources Capital Programme of 11.923 million and the spend of £575,000 to the 14th of July be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Is there any questions or comments? No. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, item 10, Capital Budget Monitoring 23-24, Housing and Technical Resources, Housing Revenue Account. Back to Graham Booth, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the last report from me this morning. And the purpose of the report, which is on pages 45 to 47 of your papers, is to provide information on the progress of the capital programme for the HRA for the period 1st of April 2023 to 14th of July 2023. Again, this is the first capital monitoring report presented to the committee for the financial year 2023-24. Section 5.1 on page 45 notes that the housing capital programme for 23-24 totals 69.596 million, and that includes the carry forward from last financial year. And this is detailed along with the funding sources at Appendix A to this report. The resource is expecting to spend to this level, and work will continue in the coming months to monitor achievable spend. I refer members back to Section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the revised Housing and Technical Resources HRA capital programme of 69.596 million and expenditure to 14th of July 2023 of 12.469 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move the recommendations again.
I'll second them.
Thank you. Is there questions or comments? David Shearer, Councillor David Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any issues with the report in itself. It's maybe just a request to yourself, Chair.
Yeah.
It's great to hear about how the capital programme is progressing, but I think it might be nice on the odd occasion to get almost like a project report, what we're spending our money on and the benefits that are coming from those projects. Would put a bit more flesh to the bones than the bare figures that we get for the officers. And I don't mean any criticism of the officers, but it's a very dry report by its very nature. And it's only a request that maybe on occasion we get a project update report which gives us the detail of houses built, families helped out, and where the money's being spent and the benefits are being received. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shearer. I'll consider that request. I'll bring it back to the officers. What I would suggest, though, is if you've got any questions and you know that you can always ask, and I wonder how much time it would take to bring that sort of information to committee and take for today, for example, the length of the agenda that we've got. But however, I do appreciate your concerns and we'll note that and we'll consider that for future. Thank you very much. Anyone else? No. Item 11 on the agenda is the Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Monitoring April to June 23, and that's Elaine Maxwell that's going to take us through that report. Elaine?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Committee. This is a standard workforce monitoring report which is prepared by personnel, and the purpose of the report, as you will be aware, is to provide Committee with an update on the employment information for the period of April to June 2023. Members will see at section 4.1, this details the absence statistics for the resource, and you'll find more detail on Appendix 1. The resource absence figure for June 2023 was 6%, and that represented a slight increase of 0.6% when we were comparing ourselves to the previous month. Although when we look at and do a comparison against June 2022, the figure has decreased by 0.4%. The June 23 figure is 1.3% higher than the council-wide figure at that time. Based on those absence figures as at June 23, the projected annual average absence for the resource for the year of 22-23 is 5.7% compared with a council-wide average of 5.6%. Moving on to section 4.2, this details the occupational health information, which again can be found in Appendix 2. You will see that there were 160 occupational health referrals made during this period. Again, slight decrease of 16 when compared with the same period last year. And you will note in terms of the appendix, that's predominantly relating to medical examinations that had taken place. Moving on to section 4.3, detailing the accidents and incidents, you'll see that there were 7 accidents and incidents recorded within the resource for this period, and that represents a decrease of 1 when we're comparing ourselves to the same period last year. Section 4.4 outlines employee relations activity that's taken place within the resource for the period, and you'll note that there were 3 disciplinary hearings held, no grievance hearings, no dignity at work, and no appeal hearings heard at the appeals panel during that period. Section 4.5 outlines the analysis of leavers, again, which is found in Appendix 2, and you will see that there were 5 leavers during this period eligible for an exit interview, with 3 exit interviews taking place. Section 4.7 details that there were 26 employees that left the resource, and managers have indicated that 25 are being replaced and 1 post was ended due to the end of a fixed term contract. With that, I would refer committee back to section 2 within the report and ask you to approve the recommendation to note the employment information for the period of April to June 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? Don't see anyone. Thank you. Item 12 on the agenda, Housing and Technical Resources Plan Quarter 4 Progress Report for 22-23. I'm going to hand you over to Sharon Egan for that one. Sharon?
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of 3 reports that I will present this morning. So the first report is the Housing and Technical Resource Plan in the Quarter 4 Progress. So the purpose of the report is to provide committee with the resources plan and the Quarter 4 Progress Report of 22 and 23, which is for the period the 1st of April 2022 until the 31st of March 2023. The background of this is that the 22-23 plan was approved by the Executive Committee on the 24th of August 2022 and noted by this committee on the 5th of October 22 and sets out the outcomes, measures and actions to be managed and delivered by the resource in the financial year of 2022-23. So the Q4 progress reports against all the resource plan measures and is contained within the Q4 progress report as attached in Appendix 2. This report has been produced from the Council's Performance Management Reporting System Improve and uses a traffic light format with the following definitions for completions. So to refer back to Section 2 of the report, the recommendations that the committee is asked to approve the following. The first is that the Housing and Technical Resource Plan Q4 Progress Report 22-23 is summarised in paragraph 5.2 and attached in Appendix 2 be noted. The second recommendation is that the key achievements made by the resource to date is detailed in paragraph 5.3 be noted. The third recommendation is that the areas for improvement and associated management actions as detailed in paragraph 5.4 be noted. And the last recommendation is that the additional scrutiny of changes in measure status between Q2 and 4 is summarised at paragraph 5.5 and detailed in Appendix 3 be noted.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'm going to move the recommendations 1 to 4.
I'll second them.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? Councillor Cowan.
Thanks, Chair. The report is good news, Sharon. It's a great report. But I just wanted to bring up the issue of the non-emergency repairs. Obviously, in this report, it's saying that non-emergency repairs are dealt with on average in 11 days. But we all know that the non-emergency repair service has been on hold since the end of June. I appreciate that's to allow resources to be redirected to void properties. And obviously that was essential that was done. But we've all, I'm sure, had cases from residents and tenants who are frustrated by the fact that there was no way of logging even their non-emergency repairs. And I've mentioned before that I think if this happens again, we should at least look at trying to keep a record of these repairs so that people are not just being told to call back at a later stage. So I have a couple of questions. Obviously, the service has been suspended for a few months. I know it's restarting next week, but can you just tell me, do we have plans in place to deal with the inevitable backlog of repairs that will have built up over the summer? And could you also, if you've got the figures to hand, tell me how many void properties have been brought back into the housing stock as a result of redirecting the resources? Thanks.
Thanks, Andrea. Sharon or Joanne, maybe? Or both, yeah?
Thanks, Councillor Cowan. In terms of the void properties, I can answer that element, and Joanne, I'll pick up in terms of the repair service. So our void properties, we have managed to achieve a significant number. We've achieved, we're about a third, we were over 400 voids in May when we made the decision to suspend the service. We're now dramatically reduced that, and we're working towards by mid-September to be as close as possible to taking 40% away from that. So I will be able to provide you with a definitive figure closer to the 18th of September when we resume, and then that will form a part of our learning outcomes and our achievements from doing that. Thank you.
Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the suspension of recording of the repairs, Councillor Cowan, we learnt from our experience during COVID when we weren't able to take access to do emergency repairs, but we kept recording them, that actually what we did was create a different issue. We had then, when we were able to go back in, we had a backlog to go back to the historic. A lot of the historic issues had been resolved, but tenants hadn't cancelled their request. So we had a lot of abortive work. So what we tried to do this time was have a short, sharp break. We will reopen the lines then, start recording, and then be able to react to them as and when they're coming in, rather than divert resources to things that may no longer be an issue. So you're correct, it was something we gave consideration to, and I just say we learnt from the COVID situation where we're for every 3 visits we were making, maybe only one of them was now needed. So we will be gearing back up to doing the repairs as soon as the lines are opened again.
Is that okay for you, Andrea? Yeah, carry on,
Yeah.
please.
Thanks, Joanne. I can see that people would record maybe repairs and then fix them themselves, or they just go away. I think it's the frustration of tenants who were contacting the line. They were certainly reporting back to me that that they can't even get to speak to anyone. Nobody was there. The message just said, if it's not an emergency, we're not dealing with it. So I think maybe another bit of thought needs to be put round about that. Just to try and make it a sort of smoother process for people. I spoke to a constituent yesterday who's actually had reported his non-emergency repair before the lines closed, but he phoned up a couple of weeks ago and he said, I've been waiting since before June. And the guy said, oh, we've got people waiting for years, and just, he was furious, that he had just been sort of dealt with like that. So I think there is an issue that maybe about how the complaints are logged and dealt with. The other concern, I suppose, is that some of these non-emergency repairs, if they happened in, June or July, they might be emergency repairs now. So I just wondered again if there's, adequate resource to deal with these, because no doubt when your line opens in September, you're going to get, you're going to be inundated with reports. Thanks.
Joanne? Joanne, yep. There you go.
I take on board the issues about communications, and hopefully we don't have to do it again. This wasn't a measure that was taken lightly. It was because of the extreme pressures on the void side of things. So lessons learned. If we ever had to do it again, hopefully not, then communications is obviously is key. Turning to the issue about resources, we are, myself, Sharon and the Director, reviewing the allocation of resources between voids and repairs as we stand, because the voids issue is not going to just disappear, because we've had that period of time. So we will be looking at how we can make sure we've got adequate resource to deal with the come in, and how we can prioritise them. Realistically though, we probably can't deal with things as fast as we may have done in the past. So our target, I think, according to the report, is 28 days, and we normally would aim to be doing it much quicker than that. We probably won't be able to go back to the standard of 11 days for some time.
Can I just pick on something that you mentioned there, Councillor Cowan? When you spoke to one of your constituents, you said that people have been sitting waiting for years. Now, I wonder if that's just a figure of speech, because I'd be very alarmed if people were sitting waiting for years. However, a recent, not housing committee, but a separate committee, someone had raised an issue about the length of some repairs, and I took that up with Joanne. There was one or two, and I think Sharon was involved as well. There's one or two that were very technical that resulted in the length of those delays. But I wonder if you could maybe just clarify what you meant when somebody said they've been waiting for years. Was that a figure of speech, or was it?
It wasn't the constituent who said that. He was told that by a member of housing staff.
I see.
We've got people who've been waiting for years. This gentleman hasn't had a bathroom ceiling light since before Christmas. And I referred it on actually to both Sharon and Joanne yesterday, because I've been trying to get it sorted for him for some months. So, I mean, it's obviously, well, I think that actually is an emergency repair if you've got no ceiling light. But I know that there are some issues around it, so I don't really want to, we don't need to get into the ins and outs of that at the moment. Okay. But that gentleman said that he called housing a fortnight ago and said, I've been waiting for months and months for this repair. And the guy that he spoke to said, oh, that's nothing. We've got people who've been waiting for years. Well, it was a member of housing who said that, not the constituent.
If a member of staff said that to a constituent, that's an extremely unfortunate situation. Sometimes you need to take things with a pinch of salt. And I'm not saying that anybody's been untruthful, but I'd be really surprised and extremely disappointed. And it may be worthwhile if you could tie up with Joanne after this to try and investigate that further, because if a member of staff has been speaking like that to a constituent, then that should really be getting dealt with. So I'd like that to be investigated. Joanne, can you look into that? Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Councillor Lambie.
We had a really hard winter, didn't we? It was minus 12 on the weather, but it was really like minus 17, it felt like. And we had a big rush of problems with our heat pumps. And now we're at the stage where we're, recommencing non-urgent repairs. It feels like we've kind of righted the ship, and a lot of that, we've got through that terrible time. And I think now is maybe a good time for us to look back and see if there's any lessons learned from that winter. Did the heat pumps perform as the manufacturers promised? Are there different lessons learned in terms of how we install them? Do we need to insulate the condensation pipes so they don't freeze up and cause the errors? Have we talked to the manufacturers about it to see if they've got any recommendations? Because it just feels a little bit remiss of us if we push on with further installation of these devices without figuring out if we can improve their performance, because, sod's law, we might have another minus 12 winter this winter, we don't know, and we have a repeat. So it feels like now is a good time to go back and look into that and see if there's anything we need to change moving forward. Thanks.
Councillor Lambie, thanks very much for your question. And I'm going to ask Joanne to try and address that, but it isn't actually on the agenda, but it's related, I suppose, because of the cold winter and the backlog that's created. But it's not necessarily something for this agenda, but I'll ask Joanne if she cares to comment.
Thank you, Councillor Lambie. I can confirm that we actually do have a group of staff working on that just now, on two aspects. One, looking at the performance of the air source heat pumps, but more generally looking at the lessons learned from how we respond to cold weather issues, so that we're prepared going into the winter.
Okay, Ross. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay. Items for decision now. It's item 13 on the agenda, and it's a Scottish Housing Regulator Annual Assurance Statement 22-23. I'm going to ask Sharon to take us through that report. Sharon.
Thanks, Chair. So the second paper is the Annual Assurance Statement, back to the Scottish Housing Regulator, and this is on pages 81 to 86. So the purpose of the report is to seek committee approval to submit the Annual Assurance Statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator. So the background of this is noted within section 3 of your report. And to summarise, each year local authorities are required to submit an Annual Assurance Statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator, confirming our compliance with regulatory requirements and highlighting any breaches. South Lanarkshire's Annual Assurance Statement for 21-22 was approved by committee on the 5th of October 2022. In terms of the Annual Assurance Statement, this is attached in Appendix 1. As recommended by the regulator and its guidance, this is short, succinct and phased upon the format provided by the regulator itself. The key requirement of the assurance statement is for committee to confirm that it's confident that the appropriate systems, evidence, relationships and channels of communication are in place to ensure the effective planning, delivery and monitoring of relevant services against our statutory and regulatory requirements. Within South Lanarkshire, the assurance required is provided through a wide range of arrangements which are in place at a council and resource-wide level. A summary of the key requirements for assurance and how these are addressed are attached in Appendix 2. Provided that tenant and resident safety is not compromised, the regulator continues to indicate that they will not engage with a landlord where it does not fully comply with regulatory requirements, where the landlord also has effective plans to return to full compliance. So in relation to this year's statement, there are two aspects highlighted below where the council is partially compliant, and that is our fire tolerable standards and fixed electrical testing. In relation to the reporting requirements for the fire tolerable standards and fixed electrical testing, a programme of work is progressing well. However, a number remain outstanding due to our inability to gain access to some of the tenancies and carry out the necessary installations and testing. However, a robust programme of work is in place to address these issues, including the appropriate use of forced entry where suitable, and this has been closely monitored within the resource. In this year's annual assurance statement, local authorities are asked to provide assurance that they have an effective approach to the collection of equalities information and are considering how they will progress towards a human rights-based approach. So this has been reflected within this year's annual assurance statement. So our next steps, subject to approval, the annual assurance statement will be signed by the chair of this committee and forwarded on to the regulator. So I refer back to section 2 for recommendations, and that is that the statement for 2022-23 as attached in Appendix 1 is approved and submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much. Item 14 on the agenda, annual review of the South Lanarkshire Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan 22-23. Again, back over to you, Sharon.
Thank you. This is my final report this morning. So the annual review of the South Lanarkshire Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan 22-23. The purpose of the report is to update committee on the completion of the 4th annual review of our RRTP from 2019 to 2024. So the background to this, our Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan was developed in collaboration with a range of partners and also stakeholders by Housing and Technical Resources Committee in January 2019. The plan is subject to an annual review process. The plan is built upon a longer standing commitment and well-established framework within South Lanarkshire to meet the needs of homelessness people. So the annual review for 22-23 is structured around five high-level priority objectives. There are 53 indicators against which the Council and its partners monitor progress, comprising of 33 actions and 20 measures. In accordance with wider reporting arrangements across the Council, we have categorised these in a traffic light format. It's been an extremely challenging year, both locally and nationally, in terms of maintaining progress. It's been noted nationally that homelessness figures were at their highest they have been since records began in 2002. During 2022 and 23, in line with national trends, homelessness levels spiked in South Lanarkshire with a 17% increase in homelessness presentations. The challenging economic climate, which is the cost of living crisis, and challenges and changes within the private rented sector are in the basis to have driven these increased demands for homelessness services. The position was further exacerbated by the impact on the housing system of the positive contribution which the Council and local registered social landlords have been playing in providing accommodation to Ukrainian households displaced following the invasion in Ukraine. Despite our most challenging of contexts in 22 and 23, positive progress was made, with over 92% of the indicators on or slightly behind target to achieve the projected outcomes within the identified timescales. Table 1 details the categorisation of the 53 indicators. Moving forward, at our priorities for 2023-24, we're reviewing the progress of Year 4, and that's been noted under very challenging circumstances. However, significant positive indicators of success have been achieved. The review has also confirmed the continuing commitment that our partners and ourselves have and to challenge and support homelessness and the longer-term objectives of the plan. In terms of financial implications, the funding provided by the Scottish Government today includes $453,000 to support the continued implementation of the RRTP in 22 and 23, and a further $460,000 was awarded for 2023-24. This funding will continue to be used to progress the delivery of the 5 key priority objectives of the plan. Therefore, I take you back to section 2 of the recommendations, and committee is asked to approve number 1, that the progress made in delivering our objectives as set out in the annual review as Appendix 1 is noted, that the proposed revisions to the RRTP as detailed in section 5 is approved, and to note that the key priorities be progressed in 23-24 as detailed in section 6, and again, that these are noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Thank you very much. I see you've got Councillor Cowan.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan is fantastic. The results that South Lanarkshire produce every year are just, great. I've no criticism at all of how the plan's been used and how things are progressing. I think we do really well as a council, and I think that I think that's all to be commended into the homelessness team. And they've got a huge workload, and I want to commend everyone for that. I do want to just make a comment, and I'm really just looking for the thinking behind this. It's definitely not a criticism, so please, I'm a big fan of this work. But on page 57, we're talking about the number of homeless presentations and the level of homeless households. And you're looking for the members here to approve doing away with the target of reducing that by 10 to 20%.
Andrea, can I just interrupt you a bit? You said page 57 there.
Sorry, page 90.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
sorry, page 90, and it's table 3. So you're asking that it be approved that we take away that target of reducing the homeless presentations and homeless households by 10 to 20% and replace it with the phrase maintain or reduce the level of homelessness. So I'm just wondering what the thinking is behind that. I'm obviously hoping that it's not just a case of removing a target because we're unlikely to meet it. And that's because of circumstances out with our control. We're going to have a homelessness landslide coming towards us as mortgages keep increasing, private rents keep increasing. So as I say, it's not a criticism. It just occurs to me that it's better to have some data where you're missing your targets because, you can then use that as evidence. Scottish Government have approved some more money for homelessness, and our local authority is one of 6 that's in line for some money. And, my concern is that people would look at that and just think, oh, they're doing really well, they're hitting all their targets. Maybe sometimes it's better to have that evidence that these targets are being missed, just to make our case for some more funding. Thank you.
Sharon?
Thanks, Councillor Cowan. Firstly, thank you for the positive feedback about the service, and I will certainly pass that back to the teams.
Absolutely.
Because they really have been inundated with homelessness presentations. And just a bit of context in that, nationally, homeless applications are up 9%, but South Lanarkshire Council are up 19%. So that demonstrates some of the kind of factors you're seeing there. The reason that the target was removed this year, and just to give a bit of background, is that the Rapid Housing Transition Plan is a collaborative approach, is a partnership, and the key stakeholders within the partnership had just felt because of the external factors that we were unable to control, why keeping a target that we know we'll never ever achieve. So it was a consensus across the partnership with our other key stakeholders. But I know your comment in terms of sometimes it's good to have that red flag and it just paints the picture of where we're at. Just to kind of add to that, we've had a bit of conversation with the Scottish Government, and as you say, we're one of 6 local authorities that have been identified as having that significant increase in homelessness, and we are due to see a 1/6 of the share of £2 million to help support, and that's mainly because we've seen such a drive and need for temporary accommodation, so that's certainly welcomed. And in the past couple of weeks, I've met separately with the new Minister for Housing and definitely put forward our position here in South Lanarkshire. So I take your comments on board. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea. Thank you. Councillor Kalikis.
Hi, thanks, Chair. At 4.5, table 2, the second bullet point, sorry, I'm trying to look at this and speak at the same time. It says 65% of advice cases were closed with support being provided preventing homelessness from occurring. I'd like to understand a bit more about that, please. And the reason I'm asking is, as noted at 4.2, with the cost of living crisis and changes in the private rented sector, there is an increased demand for homelessness services, which I'm sure you're all very aware of. I've certainly seen it in my casework, and I know a lot of other councillors have as well. Folk in private lets, often they're long-term tenants, people that are in work, no housing arrears, nothing like that, people with young families, and they're being presented with eviction notices, and they're finding themselves coming to the council for help and being advised to stay put until the eviction process kind of runs its course. I just wonder if is that advice included in the prevented homelessness from occurring numbers at table 2? So if you're advising people to just stay put until that date and until they've been through the tribunal process and stuff, is that counted as prevented homelessness from occurring, even if temporarily? And also just a wee bit more about what's happening to these families once they are in the council system. Are they spending any time in hotels or hostels? And how quickly are they getting into permanent accommodation? Sorry, that was quite a long one.
No, thanks very much for your question. Sharon?
Thanks, Councillor. So to answer the first part of your question is no. In terms of prevention statistics, that doesn't include those people that come to us that have been served with an eviction notice. What we will do is offer those tenants housing advice and what their rights are, and that they have the right to remain within their private sector tenancy until the landlord completes the appropriate notices and seeks a court order. So we will advise private tenants of their rights and what they're entitled to do, and then they can make an informed decision about whether they wish to remain or take up housing assistance from the council at an earlier stage. So no, they are not included within our prevention statistics. And the report we are performing well in terms of prevention last year, but where we could, however, it's proven to be more and more challenging because the housing options are much more limited now. The private rented sector is not as viable as it was a year ago. So once families or anyone who then does seek advice from the council, we have a housing options service, which is across each of the 4 localities. We will offer anybody that seeks any sort of assistance for housing, we'll give them their housing options advice, we'll give them what their rights are, depending on what their current tenure is. And if they so wish to seek to present as homeless and make a homelessness application, we will take that forward. So anybody that comes to us requiring accommodation, yes, they will be offered temporary accommodation, and we've had no cases where we've been unable to provide suitable temporary accommodation. Unfortunately, earlier in the financial year, probably April, May, we were having to use bed and breakfast accommodation at that point, and that was due to an increased demand. That is not something that South Lanarkshire Council have been doing in recent years. We've always been able to manage our homelessness caseload within temporary furnished accommodation within the community. However, we have increased our temporary accommodation stock across the whole of South Lanarkshire, and we're now not using bed and breakfast as we were. And people are in temporary accommodation. The table, within the table 2, section 2, it speaks about a reduction of 65% in long-term homelessness, and we did achieve this in last year's Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan. We had a focus on rehousing longer-term homeless people. We maximised their lets where possible, and we worked with registered social landlords. So that was achieved, whereas people were spending a shorter period of time in temporary accommodation. However, we'll need to monitor that as we go forward. Given the increased demand, we might have households spending a longer time in a furnished flat. But as I say, it's temporary furnished flats across communities to allow independent living. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Janine? Okay, I suppose.
Yep, thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Anyone else? No, I don't see anyone else. Item 15 on the agenda, a disposal of domestic council property within Castlebank Park in Lanark, and I'm going to ask Joanne Forbes to deal with that one. Joanne, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is on pages 139 to 143, is to advise committee of issues regarding the properties at Castlebank House in Lanark and seek approval to dispose of those dwellings currently vacant and other units as and when they become vacant. Castlebank House is a Category B listed building situated within a public park. The property is divided from a major house into 12 dwellings, 4 of which are privately owned. Of the 8 that the council own, 4 are currently vacant. The nature of the building and its layout makes it very difficult for the dwellings to be brought up to current lettable standards or to make them energy efficient to meet the future standards we're expected to achieve for our tenants. Estimates suggest that well over £2 million would be required to invest in these 8 units to achieve the correct standards, added to which the council would require to then seek a percentage of the costs associated with the refurbishment of the building from the 4 owner occupiers. Having considered the technical options, It's recommended that the strategy for this building is a staged withdrawal, initially selling the 4 vacant properties and then the other 4 properties as and when they become vacant. The proposal would be that the properties would be declared surplus and placed on the open market. A programme of engagement with the owners and tenants will be undertaken should the committee agree to this course of action. I would therefore refer committee back to paragraph 2 of the report and recommend that the 4 vacant properties are declared surplus and placed on the open market, that the 4 occupied properties are also considered to be surplus and sold, but only as and when they become vacant, and that engagement takes place with the tenants and the owner occupiers to advise of the council's intention to withdraw from the property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Is there any questions or comments? Councillor Shearer.
I'd just like to ask, what level of assistance are we offering to the owner occupiers, and what level of engagement will we go through with the owner occupiers to deal with communal repairs going forward until the council is no longer involved? Thank you.
Joanne.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. At the moment, there are no proposals to offer assistance to the 4 owners. We're not proposing any significant investment in the building in the short term. However, if there are incidences, then we will speak to the owners about their share. But at the moment, we're not proposing any significant investment.
Councillor Shearer, I think you may want to come back on that, do you?
Thank you. Supplementary, Chair. I take it that we are still, as we do with all owner occupiers elsewhere, offering advice on grants or loans for home improvement.
Joanne?
We will provide advice and support and signpost owners to where they can get professional advice as well. However, as I say, there is no grant fund or any specific funding targeted to this building or these owners. But when we engage with them, we will advise them what their rights are and what advice they should also be seeking as owners.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask a question just to clarify a point in the report. Under the financial implications in section 7, it's in 7.1. It says that the property is currently valued between 250,000 and 350,000. Is that in total for all 4, or each of the 4 valued at 250 to 350?
Joanne?
That's in total, not per unit.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Okay. The next item on the agenda, I'm anticipating may gather a bit of discussion. So what I'm proposing to do at the moment is to suspend the meeting for 5 minutes for the BSL users for an eye rest. And we'll come back to this committee at 11 o'clock. Is that okay with everyone? Thank you. We can resume the meeting once everybody's got a seat.
Maybe mention the Susan issue beforehand and the good show.
Are we okay now? Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 16 on the agenda is Community Facility Review, Ward 7, East Kilbride, Central South. One of our councillors who had been trying to log in on the system hasn't been able to do so, but she is present and she is hearing everything that's being said. And if there's any votes or anything like that, she will be participating in that. So I'm going to ask Joanne Forbes to address this report. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is in pages 145 to 149 of your pack, is to advise committee of the matters that were considered when reviewing the council's assets within Ward 7, East Kilbride Central South, and recommend a proposed action plan for 3 specific assets. The committee will be aware of the ongoing programme of asset reviews being undertaken on a ward-by-ward basis, and the reasons why such reviews are essential. The council's existing property estate is unsustainable. Increasing budget pressures, rising operational costs, particularly around energy, changes in patterns of use, reduced income, and the rising need for significant investment in buildings that are reaching the end of their economic life require us to make some difficult choices. However, reviewing our assets at a local level does not just generate revenue savings and avoid unnecessary capital expenditure. It also presents opportunities to look for other uses, such as social housing, new business opportunities, redevelopment, and potentially community asset transfer. It also allows us to focus our budgets on sustaining and improving key assets. Ward 7 was the subject of the first review exercise and was used as a pilot to inform the wider asset review process that is currently ongoing. This report explains the processes that were now being applied to all wards, and the results of which will be brought to a special meeting of Housing and Technical Resources Committee later this year. Section 3 of your report sets out the details of the process. Section 4 of the report provides the outcomes in respect specifically of Ward 7, which identified 4 community core facilities, and Section 4.2 reviews the remaining assets within the ward and identifies potential opportunities in respect of each. The next step is for officers to engage with the users of these facilities and develop a more detailed options appraisal, as I have set out in Section 5 of the report. Not all proposals can be developed and brought forward simultaneously, and the actions identified for Ward 7 will be incorporated into the overall asset review action plan and programmed accordingly. I would therefore refer committee back to Section 2 of the report and recommend the actions. And specifically that you note the process that has been followed in terms of assessing assets, that the assets that have been identified as core within Ward 7, and that the Head of Property Services be authorised to take forward investigation into the proposals for Westwood Community Centre, Red Deer Centre and Dunedin Pavilion and Pitches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
Thank you very much. And I see I've got Councillor Cowan.
Thanks, Chair. We as a group are unhappy with the process used in arriving at these recommendations, and the fact that this paper has come to committee with absolutely no community engagement appalls us. These facilities are used by residents from all over East Kilbride and beyond, and there has been no consultation with adjoining wards, service users or the wider public. This paper is the result of a pilot discussion with ward councillors of Ward 7 only. Surely the point of a pilot is to take note of feedback and use that to fine-tune the process. Our own ward councillors from Ward 7 have corresponded with Stephen Gibson, advising that they were unhappy at how these meetings were conducted, and they felt the process wasn't properly explained at the time. So we would like to move that this paper be deferred and a uniformed process for use throughout South Lanarkshire, where we're all going to have to deal with these impending closures. So we would ask that we'd move the paper be deferred, a uniformed process for use throughout South Lanarkshire with full community engagement brought back before this committee before any decisions around specific properties are taken. I'd refer you to the Council's Connect plan, which says we will act on what the Council, on what the communities tell us. And I'd like us to go back and ask the communities what they want to happen in their own wards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Joanne, would you care to comment on Councillor Cowan's comments?
With regard to the engagement, the proposal now is to engage with the people affected by these proposals. I accept what you say about community engagement. However, the reality is that we do not have the budgets to sustain these properties. And we are experiencing already closures by default where we don't have the budgets to repair buildings and therefore they close when some incident or event happens. So we can't manage a transition, we can't plan for alternatives, we can't work with the communities to come up with proposals because the events trigger the results. We also have experienced, we know and are aware of the pressures on the Leisure Trust and the deficit that they are running with. And we've already experienced this year where we've had 22 properties handed back to the council at very short notice and again with no engagement. So I accept what you're saying about wider engagement. However, the budgets that we have at the moment really mean that we do have to make some decisions regarding our properties now.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Cooper online.
Can you hear me, David?
Yes, I can.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Just getting the other laptop sorted to get the message. I'm asking this question on behalf of Councillor Watson from our group. Can you tell me what the long-term strategy for bowling will be in East Kilbride if this closure goes ahead?
I could attempt to answer that, but I'm going to leave that one to Joanne. I think I know the answer.
The strategy for bowling is part of the Leisure Trust review and what the Leisure Trust are looking at. However, in terms of this report, we haven't actually said that this is a specific closure on a specific date. What we've asked for is consent for officers to engage, to have a discussion about what happens next. So the strategy for bowling in general is not part of this report.
Thanks, Joanne. That clarifies that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I'd like to welcome my constituents that are sitting up the back. You've sat through and you've listened to a lot of debate today, and it's been gloom and doom because we don't have the money to do what we want to do. But I want to stick to facts, Chair, and no play party politics, because I am sick to the teeth of listening to party politics getting played out with certain people in this council. I've got 17 people emailed me. I wrote back to the 17 of them. 8 graciously gave me a phone number. I spoke to the 8 people, and at the end of the day, yeah, they were upset that that was a proposal, and it is only a proposal because, as Joanne's quite rightly said, they'll be in depth. Yeah, and you can, that's right, that leaflet's about 10 years old, I think. Something like that, 10 years old. Anyway, Chair, getting back to the real issues here. The real issue is quite simple. I totally concur with people having the democratic right to argue their case, and they're quite entitled to, and they feel passionate about it, and I commend that. I feel passionate about the people I represent, and I feel passionate about my ward, and I've represented it for 28 years. Now, if we get into the nitty gritty, I've spoke to the 8 people that phoned me, gave me their phone number, and I've explained the situation, the dire situation that this council's in. We're facing £60 million of savings in the next 2 years. And some people can grandstand and say they want this and want that. I sat at the 3 meetings that Joanne Forbes chaired at no time, and I've known Elaine and John for 30 odd years. Elaine's dad was a personal friend of mine, so I've got no axe to grind with councillors. But at no time did I hear John or Elaine mention anything about being upset the way it was getting handled. She brought forward the proposals, we looked at it, we discussed it, we asked questions, and the end result is sitting before councillors to make a decision today. And I'm going to finish with this, Chair. This is a cross-party working group from the 1st of April 2021. And it's not taking pot shots at anybody, but John Anderson was the chair of the resource that said this, because he's retired now. Michael McGlynn, Executive Director of Community and Enterprise Resources. And I'm saying, hope people are taking this in. John was the chair of that committee. Identified properties. The review process has been highlighted a number of properties/facilities which no longer will be in SLLC, i.e. the Trust's best interest to manage and maintain. And as Joanne said, we've already this year had numerous properties handed back to the council. Red, recommend for closure. Red, recommend for closure. And lo and behold, East Kilbride and Straven, outdoor bowling. And there it is, constituents, there it is for everybody to see. Red Deer and Murray, close it under an SNP council. That's the realities of life in here. I don't want to see any, I never come into politics to shut things. I come into politics to help people, but I'm a realist. And we've got to find £60 million. I understand your frustration and your upset, but it's a building that's had sleepers round the retaining wall for the last 7 years because the money's not there to invest. We cannot spend money that we don't have. So I certainly will be voting to engage with yourselves. And I've said, and Mr. McDonald's here today, I've said to your Vice President no later than Friday evening, I'll come to the Red Deer and I'll put my case forward. And I hope my other 2 colleagues come as well. But the SNP's proposals, Andrea's saying now we need to go and talk to people about this. Andrea wasn't a councillor. She's just a new councillor this term. The SNP were prepared to shut both bowling clubs within the ward. No shut one, no shut the 2 of them. That was a proposal. Also in the proposal, they were going to close Duncan Rig dual use. They were going to shut the Westwood Hall. That's in the pack as well. But you know the difference between a Labour coalition and the SNP? We're going to talk to you before we take any decision. We're going to use the democratic mandate. I don't think it's funny, sir, but you're entitled to laugh. I'm a serious politician, and I take my politics serious. And I'm saying to you, that's the only way forward. And this is going to happen in every ward in South Lanarkshire and in every ward in Scotland, because we've got millions and millions of pounds to save. And know why? Because the Scottish Government will not fund local government. These are facts, my friends. These are no pie in the sky fancy words I'm using. It's factually correct. Thank you. I'll finish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was just going to remind you just that when you're addressing this committee, it's the members of the committee. The members of the public are here for observation purposes only. Thank you very much for your comments. I see Andrea Cowan wants to come back in.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, a wee bit patronising from Councillor Convery there. I may only have been a councillor for a year, but perhaps fresh eyes are what are needed in these circumstances and not just battering on about the same old stuff. What I would like to say is that we are not here today to argue whether the Red Deer Bowling Club or any of these other facilities are closed or not. That's for a future discussion. We are here to say that a process has to be set out. This is going to be rolled out in every ward in South Lanarkshire. Our councillors, whether they voiced it in front of Mr Convery or not, are unhappy. They felt they were just having a discussion. They didn't realise that a paper was going to be brought before committee. Unfortunately, they're not on this committee, so they're not here to speak to this. They have already met with the bowling club, and we just want a process put in place so that when this comes to future committees, future wards, that the community are involved in engagement before the papers come to the committees. We're really just looking for clarity of the process, and that is why, as I said, I move that this paper be put back, deferred and brought back to us once all of these things have been sorted out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Lennon, you wanted to?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank the members of the Red Deer Bowling Club for coming down. It's not every community organisation that can get several dozen people to come along to a council committee meeting on relatively short notice. So I think it's a real testament to the activity of your group and the strength of your group that you were all able to come down and make your voices known. In response to Councillor Cowan and her amendment, I think there are some reasonable points. I think that the most important part is clarity about the process. And the reality is that the process that's being followed, to be absolutely clear, is that these meetings are being conducted on a locality basis, and the outcome of the meetings is to identify the properties that will then seek to have alternative proposals. It doesn't mean that the properties that are identified through these meetings are closed. It doesn't mean that the council is immediately going to withdraw funding them. What it means is this is a way of managing the workload of officers so that we can identify the properties that alternative proposals need to be identified for. And one of the outcomes of that is that we can then engage with the people who use those facilities, such as the Red Deer Bowling Club, who use part of this particular facility. And we can engage with them and say, what are the alternatives in terms of ownership? What are the alternatives in terms of maintenance? What are the alternatives that will allow the community groups, such as yourselves, to continue using those in the context of diminishing budgets for local government, as Councillor Convery identified? There are funding streams that are available to community groups that are not available to the local authorities. Now, this process is going to be rolled out across every locality in South Lanarkshire. It's not going to be an enjoyable process for any set of local members. And maybe there's been some confusion or some misunderstanding about the nature of this report. This is not about, as you've said, Councillor Cowan, it's not about closing a particular facility or closing particular facilities. It's about identifying those facilities for whom alternative proposals need to be identified. Now, I'm under no doubt that there's a workable way that the Red Deer Bowling Club can continue to operate using part of the site, accessing particular kinds of funding, doing something of that nature. But if we continually kick the can down the road and say we're not even going to identify the terms of engagement, we're not going to even identify what properties we need to find alternatives for, then this process is simply going to go on forever and ever. We're not going to have sustainable long-term approaches to these properties, and we're going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds in terms of the council's budget to maintain some buildings and some aspects of some buildings that are simply not viable, and it's going to make the situation worse. So I would move that we pass the report as it stands. And the last thing I would like to reflect on is there's been a lot of conversation about what facilities and what community assets might have to close, might have to be disposed of by the council in one form or another. It's more difficult for the administration and for this Labour administration to have the conversation in the open and to be straight with people and to say, these are the properties that we think are in the core, and these are the ones for which we need to find alternatives. That's what we're doing. And I think there's a contrast to be drawn between the previous administration and ours. We're happy to have this conversation just now. We're happy to pass this report as it stands and then engage with people in good faith about what the future of these facilities is going forward. It'll be my ward next. It'll be the other members of this community's wards after that. I think we just need to be straight with people, and I think that's what this report does, and that's why we should be passing it.
Thanks, Martin. So there is a motion and it's been seconded. There's been an amendment proposed. But I don't have a seconder. Is there a seconder to the amendment? I've got Councillor Buchanan, Archie Buchanan. Oh, is he taking his hand down? So is there if there's not a seconder to the amendment, then the motion carries. So we'll get Councillor Gray. Thank you very much. So,
Motion on the amendment.
sorry?
We're looking for a seconder for the amendment.
Yeah.
Said the motion.
Councillor Gray. Can you come back in, please? You've actually seconded the motion. The motion what I made. And
Oh, sorry. Miss Taffel, but no, I'm seconding the amendment, not the motion. Sorry about that.
Very much. Okay. So the item needs to go to a vote. So I don't think that's necessary because the system actually records everyone's names on as a roll call vote. So I'd propose to continue just with the normal voting system. Names are recorded on the screen, will be displayed on the screens as well. So hand you over to Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So to confirm that the motion is to approve the recommendations on page 145 of the papers. That's proposed by the Chair and seconded by the Depute. The amendment is to defer agreeing those recommendations as presented in the report, proposed by Councillor Cowan and seconded by Councillor Gray. So we'll just open the vote.
Okay, so again, the motion is for the papers as they're laid out in front of us, and the amendment is Councillor Cowans, who is asking for the matter to be continued. Okay, go ahead. I don't see it on the screen. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Before you announce the outcome of the vote, I'll draw members' attention to the fact that Councillor Kerr is attending remotely, but she's unable to log on, and she's intimated that she's voting for the motion. So whatever appears on the screen, there'll be one added to that. Am I correct? Thank you. Has everybody voted?
I think most people have voted, but we'll just give you one more minute just to confirm. Thank you.
So can you just tally the votes then?
All right, I'll just stop the voting now. And so I can confirm that we have 10 that have voted for the motion, but plus Councillor Kerr is 11, and 11 voted for the amendment.
So the amendment carries. The item will be suspended, I do believe. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, Councillor Kerr. I haven't added councillor Kerrs to that. Is that what you were trying to say, Helen?
No, sorry. With councillor Kerr, we have 11 for the motion and 11 for the amendment.
And the chair has the casting vote, so I'm sticking with my motion, that the motion go ahead as is in the papers, so the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Item 17 on the agenda is 2 and 2A Langlands Avenue, Kelvin South Industrial Estate, East Kilbride, and it's a lease to Ellsworth Adhesives Limited, and I'm going to ask Jerry McFarlane to deal with that.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report, which is on pages 151 to 153 of your papers, is to advise the committee of the request for a lease of number 2 and 2A Langlands Avenue, Kelvin South Industrial Estate, East Kilbride, to Ellsworth Adhesives Limited, and seek approval to the principal terms. Ellsworth have occupied number 2 Langlands Avenue since June 2006 and taken on the adjacent property 2A in 2007, with the lease being amended. And since the expiry of that lease, it has remained on an annual lease at £85,000. Units typical of the units within the estate, which all suffer from defective floor slabs, which result in severe moisture problems affecting the property. And this limits the use of the units and reduces both the marketability and rentals. As a result, occupational and rental levels within the estate have, up until recently, remained fairly static. However, as a result of increasing demand for industrial space, rental levels are rising, and as a result, negotiations were entered into with the tenant for a new lease. The terms are on section 5 report on page 152 and are summarised as a 5-year lease at a date of entry to be agreed, the rental being £101,000 per annum with a 3-month rent-free period. I would therefore refer committee back to section 2 of the report and recommend approval of the lease on the terms set out in section 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move those recommendations.
I'll second them.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much for that. Item 18 on the agenda is floor 14, Council Offices on Maddy Street, Hamilton, and its extension of a lease to Siemens Group LLP. Again, Jerry McFarlane, will you take us to that report?
Thanks again, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is held on page 155 and 156 of your papers, is to advise the committee of the request for an extension of the lease of floor 14 of this building to the Siemens Group Limited and seek approval on the principal terms. Siemens Group was originally formed by 12 councils and is currently utilised by 28 of the councils, and have occupied floor 14 of this office since the 1st of September 2013 under a 10-year lease. The current rent of £109,727 per annum was last reviewed in 2018 and is a composite charge which includes all costs. Siemens have now requested terms for a 5-year extension of lease. As the operational costs of the building have increased, is it proposed that this composite rent will also be increased from £109,727 to £121,000. The remaining terms again are on section 5 of the report and are summarised effectively as a 5-year lease, with the first year of the rent remaining at £109,727 and years 2 to 5 raising to £121,000, with other terms remaining the same. I would therefore again refer committee back to section 2 of the report and recommend approval of the lease extension on the terms set out in section 5.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I'm going to move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? No. Thank you very much. Item 20 on the agenda is urgent business, of which I have none, so I thank you very much for your attendance. Beg your pardon? Oh, sorry, I missed the last item. Getting ahead of myself. No, that's what we just dealt with. That was 18. Item 19 on the agenda. Thank you. Item 19 on the agenda is the Stewartfield Community Centre, East Kilbride, and it's an asset transfer to Badminton Academy Social Enterprise. Again, Joanne Forbes, can you take us through that one? Sorry, folks. Try to get an early finish.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is in pages 157 to 161 of your pack, is to advise committee of a request for community asset transfer by lease that was received from Badminton Academy Social Enterprise for Stewartfield Community Centre. Stewartfield Community Centre in East Kilbride is currently leased to the Leisure Trust and consists of a main sports hall with a high ceiling and a smaller community hall. In February 2023, we received a request for asset transfer by lease, and in accordance with the statutory process, the application was advertised and representations sought. There were 212 representations received, 28 in favour and 184 raising objections. The basis for the objections were substantially around uncertainty for existing users, the impact on ASN groups that use the facility, and the belief that the council or the Leisure Trust would continue to bear all of the costs associated with running the property. The request was placed before the Asset Transfer Assessment Panel, and sections 3.6, 3.7 and 3.8 of your report highlight the various matters that the panel took into consideration in assessing the request. In section 4 of the report, it summarises the outcome of that assessment and suggests some mitigations that are proposed in respect of risks that were identified with this request. The asset transfer request differs from many of the others that have previously been presented to committee as it relates to a community of interest, i.e. badminton, rather than a geographic community. In addition, the organisation is also a social enterprise, not a registered charity. As such, the assessment panel felt that the additional assurances were required to ensure that the proposal delivered best value and community benefits, and there were further discussions with BASE as a result of that. Firstly, as the organisation is not a charity, it is proposed to include in any lease agreement that there will be a need for council consent to any changes in the organisation's constitution or board control. Secondly, in recognition that the community benefits relate to badminton, and in part that is offset by loss of community benefit to the geographic community, it has been agreed that the Leisure Trust will retain the right to access the small hall for 9 hours a week at no charge. The BASE business model includes for income generated from letting the small hall to other organisations, and those that currently book the facility will be approached by BASE to ask if they wish to continue to do so. This, however, will not resolve the concerns of the users of the larger hall, which will, under this proposal, be used exclusively for badminton. Some of the users of that hall are the ASN groups that have been referred to in the representations. The Leisure Trust have confirmed that these uses could be accommodated at the John Wright Sports Centre, and if the asset transfer by lease is agreed, then we can and will offer assistance in transitioning from the existing location to John Wright Sports Centre. On balance, and in light of the significant operating loss incurred at present, over £140,000 per annum, the asset panel recommends the grant of a 5-year lease on the terms and conditions set out in section 5 of the report. I would draw the committee's attention to the fact that BASE will be responsible for all repairs and maintenance and insurance during the course of the lease. I refer the committee back to section 2 of the report and recommend the asset transfer on the lease terms in section 5 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendations. Is there any questions or comments?
I'll second them.
Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Chair. As a newly elected
And welcome to the first meeting.
Thank you. So I'm a newly elected councillor, and this obviously impacts upon my ward. I mean, obviously, I think as Councillor Convery kind of in his item, or rather the item earlier on the agenda commented, you know, we're facing significant funding gap issues, and as a councillor for this ward, I think this proposal allows this resource to remain accessible to the community. The risks have outlined in the report have been mitigated. For example, it's a 5-year lease. So as a councillor for this ward, I support this proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. And I've got Councillor Cooper.
A couple of questions here, Chair, on behalf of David Watson. I believe that's around his ward as well. And Joanne may have answered them, but just to get it on record, I'd like to ask them. Firstly, can confirmation be given that all user groups that presently use Stewartfield will be allocated alternative suitable provision in East Kilbride at comparable day and times as present? Secondly, can confirmation be given that local groups not associated with SLLC still have access to the facility with comparable charges and times? And thirdly, if this facility is lost, are SLLC sure that they have capacity in East Kilbride for sports access for all in meeting the demand that's out there? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Joanne, has it been covered? Would you like to address that?
Thank you. In terms of the existing users, as I mentioned in the report, BASE intend to approach the existing users of the small hall to offer them the continued booking. We obviously can't guarantee that the users will wish to take up that offer, but we also have discussed with the Leisure Trust what other locations could be offered. I can't guarantee at this meeting it would be exactly the same times in other facilities, but we will work with the groups that don't want to remain at Stewartfield to identify solutions that they feel are acceptable. With regards to access to all, one of the reasons that we are reserving 9 hours a week within the facility is to make sure that the classes currently provided to the elderly community, primarily, not exclusively, can continue to be provided, and that we can still provide and meet some of the access obligations that the Leisure Trust have. In terms of moving people to John Wright and other facilities, it actually helps to make those other facilities more sustainable by increasing the use of them. And then when we do come to the ward reviews that we've been talking about earlier, then there is a greater reason for retaining some of your other assets because you've increased the demand and the use for those assets.
Okay. Thanks, Joanne. Councillor Cooper, do you want to come back?
That was very kind of you. Thanks.
Okay. So I don't have any other questions or comments. So now this is the last item on the agenda, I'm pretty sure. And item 20, urgent business, of which there's none. So I thank you all for your attendance. See you all on the 8th of December. Thank you.